For 20 years, while the rest of the world shut its doors on Iran, one country quietly kept theirs open, and Iran's most powerful men walked right through it, carrying billions that didn't belong to them. That country was the UAE, and what just happened in the last 48 hours may have permanently slammed that door shut forever. Stay with me, because this story is moving fast and the implications are massive. Let's start with the money, because that's where it always starts. While American sanctions crippled Iran's banking system in 2010, while European restrictions tightened in 2012, and while the Trump administration's maximum pressure campaign essentially locked Iran out of the dollar economy in 2018, the UAE remained open. Not just open, conveniently open. Iranian elites, IRGC commanders, and regime officials used the UAE's uniquely permissive corporate laws to set up nameless shell companies, certificates of ownership with no names attached, just paper. Behind that paper, tens of billions of dollars in illicit money, funding missile programs, proxy militias, and luxury lives overseas. The UAE looked the other way until now. If you're finding this valuable, drop a like right now. It genuinely helps us reach more people who need to hear this. Here's where it gets extraordinary. Yesterday, the United States Treasury launched something called Operation Economic Fury, designating 35 entities and individuals that form the backbone of Iran's shadow banking architecture. 35 in a single announcement. These aren't random small players. These are the nodes that allow Iran's armed forces, including the IRGC, to access international finance, collect payment for illegal oil sales, purchase missile components, and funnel money to terrorist proxies. Simultaneously, and this is what you need to understand, the UAE is now actively cooperating with the United States to dismantle every single loophole Iran spent years carefully building inside their system. The country that once looked the other way is now holding the door open for U.S. investigators. Why? Because something happened that changed everything. During the war, Iran fired more rockets and missiles at the UAE than at any other country, more than Israel, a nation that was actively striking Iranian soil. The UAE never gave the U.S. permission to use its bases against Iran. It was never a direct combatant. Iran attacked it anyway. Airports, ports, oil infrastructure, civilian apartment buildings. Why? Because the UAE is part of the Abraham Accords and recognizes Israel as a state. Iran wanted to trigger enough civilian terror to pressure the U.S. into stopping the war. Instead, what they triggered was something far more dangerous for the regime: permanent, irreversible UAE rage. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time. We cover these developments daily, and this story is far from over. Listen to what a senior UAE official said about rebuilding trust with Iran after 2,800 missiles and drones were launched at them. Rebuilding the relationship and rebuilding the trust are two completely different things. Trust, he said, will take ages and ages and ages. That's not a diplomatic statement. That's a door closing. And then yesterday, the UAE did something it hasn't done in over 35 years. It announced it was leaving OPEC, effective May 1st, 2 days from now. Their message required no translation. They refused to sit at any table that includes Iran. Now, before you assume this instantly reshapes global oil markets overnight, here's the honest picture, because this story deserves accuracy, not hype. The UAE's OPEC quota was 3.5 million barrels per day, but their actual output was only 2.2 million. They were already producing well below quota, so the quota wasn't their real constraint. The real bottleneck is the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran has effectively blockaded, preventing tankers from freely exiting. The UAE does have a workaround pipeline that cuts across the country, bypassing the strait entirely, but that pipeline maxes out at roughly 1.5 million barrels per day. The ceiling isn't OPEC. It's Iran's stranglehold on the waterway. However, and this is the number that should concern Tehran, the UAE's energy minister stated that free from OPEC, they could eventually scale to 6 million barrels per day if market demand supports it. 6 million. For context, that would make them one of the largest independent oil producers on Earth. Here's where the financial destruction of Iran becomes truly staggering. It's not just the OPEC exit, it's not just the shadow banking crackdown. Yesterday, the Treasury Department announced it froze over $300 million in cryptocurrency as part of Operation Economic Fury alone. And US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent issued a statement that should be read very carefully. Iran's primary oil export terminal at Kharg Island is nearing storage capacity. This will force the regime to reduce oil production, resulting in an additional $170 million per day in lost revenue and causing permanent damage to Iran's oil infrastructure. Permanent. That word is doing enormous work in that sentence. Now combine that with the U.S. naval blockade already costing Iran hundreds of millions daily in lost export revenue, and you begin to understand why leaked internal Iranian reports are describing the country as approaching economic collapse. Someone inside Iran, using either a loophole or Starlink, posted a translated account of a government economic briefing that included this line: Iran informed us that they are in a state of collapse. That's not a Western analyst saying that. That's someone inside the regime's own orbit. And yet, here's the part that reveals just how cornered and dangerous the Iranian leadership has become. Iran's National Security Committee has responded to all of this by threatening the UAE, specifically warning that the UAE is aligning with America for a renewed attack and that, quote, this country will be taught a lesson. They even addressed Emirati citizens directly. This is not the behavior of a country that believes it's winning. This is the behavior of a leadership that is terrified, isolated, and making strategic errors in real time. Countries that are genuinely winning wars do not threaten the neighbors they spent decades financially depending on. Meanwhile, the Gulf Cooperation Council, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE jointly declared on Tuesday that they reject any Iranian claim of control over the Strait of Hormuz and will not accept any fees for tanker transit. That's 6 countries unified publicly on the record. Iran wanted to intimidate the Gulf into submission. Instead, it consolidated them against it. There is one thread still unresolved, and it matters enormously. Iran is now working on a second peace proposal after the U.S. rejected the first. We don't yet have details on what this second version contains or whether it's even been formally submitted. What we do know is that inside Iran, there's a genuine internal split. The pro-deal faction argues the regime cannot survive without an agreement. The anti-deal faction, intoxicating itself on its own propaganda, believes Iran holds leverage it simply does not have. The United States, for its part, is reportedly considering framing any enrichment restriction not as a zero enrichment demand, but as a 20-year moratorium, not because it's giving up, but because a deal that allows Iranian leadership to save face publicly is more likely to actually hold than one that looks like total surrender. This is the same playbook George H.W. Bush used when managing the Soviet collapse in 1991. He didn't gloat. He managed the transition. Whether the current administration can thread that same needle, getting everything it needs while letting Iran's leadership tell a different story to its own people, is the central question of the next few weeks. As soon as that second proposal surfaces, we'll break it down in full. Daily updates, nothing missed. The Islamic Republic built its financial survival on one critical assumption, that the UAE would always be too economically entangled to fully turn against them. That assumption is now gone. The shadow banking system is being dismantled. The oil revenue is being strangled. The one regional neighbor that kept the lights on is now helping to turn them off. The regime's future may be measured not in years, but in decisions made in the next few weeks. If this breakdown helped you understand what's actually happening, share it with one person who needs to see the real picture, not the propaganda version. And if you want this level of analysis delivered daily, subscribe. We don't wait for the weekly recap. By the time others catch up, we've already moved on to what happens next.